Oh, good afternoon, everyone. How's lunch? Excellent. All right. So excited that you could actually join us today to learn about how you can build communities. My name is Christine Abernathy. I am a developer advocate on the open source team at Facebook.
And I'm Ted Reed. I'm a security engineer, software developer on our security and incident response team.
Right, by show of hands, how many of you out there actually have an open source project that you're maintaining? Yeah, that's a good 100%. Number. It's about like, I'd say 50%. How many want to build even more awesome communities? I'm assuming all of you, of course, you want to do that. So that's what this talk about, and we hope that we can help you with that. And while this talk is titled, building communities around open source security software, we think that this should also apply to any of you who have an open source project out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to share key learnings from building OSQuery project. So OSQuery is a security tool for host intrusion detection. And it's installed on every Facebook laptop as well as server. And what we want to discuss is the interesting challenge that the OSQuery team, as well as the Facebook security team, found when they tried to develop in the open. And we're going to highlight some of the difference of working with the security tool versus all of the other open source projects that we have. And by sharing our learnings, we hope this is going to help any of you out there, whether it's a security tool or an open source project, if you're having difficulty building a strong community.
Cool, so now that we kind of got the goals down, I want to tell you a little bit about the motivation. So we said we're going to use OSQuery as our use case for trying to build open source security software. And the reason we're doing that is because this is almost the first year anniversary of us having open sourced OSQuery. So at that year time, we kind of took a step back and wanted to reflect and criticize ourselves on all the kind of decisions that we made and all the experiences that we had when we were building OSQuery. And when we did that, the first thing we noticed is that almost half the effort that we put into the project is because it's open source, right? And that kind of means two things. One, we put so much more effort into open sourcing this and so much more effort into the project because we knew it was going to be open source. And we got almost that same amount of effort given back to us by contributors, by architecture reviews, just by the general awesomeness that comes with putting your code out in the open, especially for a security tool, and having everyone's eyes on it, right? So because we noticed that, how much effort we were putting in as a team, as Facebook, as a security team at large, and all the effort that the community was putting in, we wanted to get up on stage, put something together, and try to give back to everyone, right? So, and that's kind of culminating in hey, how can we set everyone else up for success to build awesome communities as well?
So let's take a brief detour and actually figure out why on earth does Facebook do open source software? And I could tell you a story about that fateful day in 2004 when a young Harvard student sat on his desk and picked up the LAMP stack and started coding. So Facebook was built on the shoulders of giants, and we definitely want to give back. But that's not enough. I could also tell you how open source is aligned with our hacker culture, where Facebookers get together periodically and just sit together and hack on crazy ideas because we like to say that code wins the argument. And that's part of the story, but that's not all. I could also tell you about the social obligation. Facebook's mission is to make the world more open and connected, and we can talk about how sharing the projects with the developer community kind of works towards that mission. Yeah, this is really true, but that's not all there is. So why? Why does Facebook open source? For Facebook, it's not ideological lip service. It's not even ideology at all. The reason why Facebook open sources is it's good for the company. Now, I'm sure many of you out there might also say that it's good for your company, but for example, there are some business models out there. There are some folks who do open source because they just have an enterprise version of community software, or they're providing professional services, or even commercial support. But wait, Facebook doesn't sell software. We don't even actually offer commercial support or even professional services. So when we say that it's good for the company, what exactly do we mean? So there are many reasons, but I just want to highlight just 3 of them. Number 1, it actually accelerates innovation. So we find that when we are actually open sourcing our code or our stack, our hardware designs, that we are giving other companies and individuals a chance to move just as fast as we do. And far from this being a competitive threat, because remember, we actually are not selling software, we're finding that this value actually accrues back to us. So our customers and our partners can actually take the same software that we share and create mobile apps or web apps much faster. We can help popularize some of like the unconventional approaches we have and just give them a much more broader appeal. And then even better, we actually can benefit from some of the contributions that actually come back to us. The second reason why it's good for the company, it just makes us write better software. So it doesn't mean that we're checking for spelling mistakes or even looking for comments or making sure that everything is well documented, but when we're writing better software, we know that our project is going to be open source. So it just makes us do a lot better job from the start. We look at making sure that the project itself is well encapsulated, the fact that it can also be extensible, and we also create much cleaner and much more stable APIs. So even internally, remember we have thousands of engineers. When we actually open source a project, it makes it that much easier to reuse that project because it's something that doesn't have mysterious tendrils all around Facebook. Now, the third reason that we actually find that open source is good for the company is it allows us to share the challenges that we have with other people. So we show them the tough challenges that we've had and how we've solved them, and then invite other people to actually come and join us if they're interested in working on some of those same challenges. And we find that this actually works. So we run surveys periodically with some of the new people who join, and we found that in the last survey that 3/4 of the people who were new hires say that they had some knowledge of Facebook open source. And of those people, 3/4 or just over half said that this actually positively influenced their decision to join Facebook. And just about 1/3 of the people who joined said that they were actually using their prior experience with Facebook in their current role. So this means that people can get up and running, not in months, not in days, but even hours from when they join Facebook. So suffice it to say that open source is really good for the company. It's a powerful argument for why we open source. So let's look, I want to make one really key important point. Whatever Facebook open source is out there is what we're actually using in production. And we only open source what we use in production. So that's how we know, and that's how you will also know that what you're using is projects that work, that they work at scale, they're well maintained, and that they're valuable to us. So how serious are we about open source? Let's look at some numbers. So today we have 320 projects out there, of which we've had about 46,000 people who have forked those projects, 91,000 commits to those repos, and we have 284,000, so it's just over 250,000 followers that are actually using our projects. So yes, on average, we have about 1,000 followers per repo. So followers are only a representation of what it means to be the communities out there. So we can only accelerate, we can write better software, and we can feel comfortable sharing what we have with others when we build powerful communities. So let's talk about challenges. And we're not going to talk about challenges of scale or complexity. We're going to start talking about the challenges that we faced in actually building and maintaining these healthy communities.
So there's a really awesome saying I learned at Facebook around open source. And before I joined Facebook, I was really into open source. I was one of those people that joined, already was familiar with a couple of the stacks, Apache Thrift, and absolutely true, you can get up and running and start pushing code within hours. But after you open source a project, right, you've done an insurmountable amount of work. It does not stop there, right? Actually, the hard part starts as soon as you switch that project from private to public. Right? That's when that's the point of this talk here, right? So let's take a look at OS Query, right? OS Query is a security tool. It runs on every machine that Facebook has. It's SQL-powered operating system instrumentation and monitoring. So it kind of exposes the operating system as SQL. So concepts in the operating system are now tables, right? So every process that's running on your system has a bunch of attributes. Those attributes are the columns inside that table. And it's just one of a bunch of security tools that make up the family of Facebook security software. I'll call two out. One's Threat Exchange, the other is Infer. Infer is awesome if you haven't tried that out. Take a look at it. It's a static analyzer. Love static analysis. But let's also take those numbers that we just saw on the screen and compare them to OSQuery. So it's one out of the 320 repos, but it makes up about 5,000 of the followers. And my favorite number here is this 2,000 commits. So after a year of open sourcing, of having OSQuery open source, we have about 2,000 commits. So when we say that after we hit the private to public, that's when the real work began, we're saying is that's when building this community around this software and kind of holding back and keep asking ourselves the question every day, is this going to be successful, right? That's when it got challenging, right? And to this day, it's still challenging. We still sit every morning, we open our computers, we look at the GitHub repo, we see how many people start it, we see how many pull requests are there, we like hope that no one is bad-mouthing it, right? They never do, absolutely not. But I want to take a look at that timeline a little bit closer. And so about a year ago, October 28th was release day. Before that, June 30th was the first commit to GitHub. We didn't see our first major commit until April 1st, like major feature push into OSQuery until April 1st. That entire time, that 6 months between there, we're doing that nail-biting like, oh my gosh, was this the right decision? Do people really love our software? We want to hear experiences. Tell us if it's bad. Like, give us some criticism. We'll fix it for you, we promise, right? We're like, what's going in here? We're getting use out of it, right? We're deploying it. We're seeing awesome things from it. We're making our developers better. We're making our security team better. Tell us if you are too, right? And we just kind of expected that everyone was kind of loving it. We went to a couple conferences. We would go to like intrusion detection meetups around the Bay Area and kind of ask people if they use it. And they're like, yeah, it's good, it's good, it's good. Give us some feedback. Oh, it's good, it's awesome, it's awesome. So we're still kind of like really scared at this point. So now, at this year point, right, and took these numbers 2 days ago, we have 5,000 followers on GitHub and 59 contributors, right? There's a big difference between this number. We're like, how do we have 5,000 people engaged in the security project, a community that is 5,000 people, right? And only 59 of those people are contributing to us, right? And that's contributing measured by pull requests, and that's documentation updates, fixing all our spelling errors, adding features, fixing those exclamation points and the if statements, right? Only 59. We ask ourselves now the same question we asked 6 months after we released it, like, is this expected? Are we doing something wrong, right? We take a little bit of a deeper dive into those numbers, and I pulled out a curated list here of a couple other projects. So here's some Facebook projects, actually projects that we use inside of OSQuery. And we kind of look at all of their numbers and rank them against ours. And we're like, oh my gosh, we feel like we're being blown away. We love these projects. Why aren't people showing us the same love, right? Or if they are, how are they doing it, and how do we measure that? So then we take a look at a couple non-Facebook projects, also security projects, and we also see that these numbers are outrageous, and we're super jealous. How do we get these kind of numbers? All the while coming back to this 59, and it was much less 6 months afterwards, so you could imagine kind of like our frustration. What we found out, and the rest of this presentation, we described like how Facebook does open source, how we support our community with all our projects, and then compare them to OSQuery. What we're going to learn is that this 59 is actually amazing, and we have to take away that only, and we have to say, we have 59 contributors, right? Exclamation point. This was expected, but we'll also teach you a little bit of how we were misrepresenting the engagement, right? There's different ways to measure if someone's using a security tool versus an open source developer library. So at the end of the day, and hopefully at this end of this presentation, demonstrate how like we did find all that love. We found all that love. That 6 months, we were now able to measure that love. And if we were to release another open source security tool, we would not be biting our nails, right? We would be feeling the love the whole time.
So kind of just to go to that, when you're actually building a project, there are some things that you want to think about when you want to, how do you know what your community is? And this actually follows the same pattern if you're building a regular product. You want to make sure that you understand the community and that you're actually solving the problems that they're looking for. So the first thing you want to do is that you want to understand your audience. Put yourself in their shoes and find out, ask yourself a question. Are you actually solving their problem? Are you doing something that they would find useful? So before a project release, on the open source team, we actually look at every project and we make them ask the question, why? Why are you open sourcing this? Why is it good for the community? Why is it good for Facebook? Otherwise, we don't greenlight the project. But this actually forces the people working on the projects to do that, and you should actually get into the same discipline. So beyond answering the question of why would you use it, there's also a question of how would somebody actually use your project? So there are very many things that you want to think about, and I want to give you some examples from our projects. So Stetho is an Android debug library that was released earlier this year. And the team went into a lot of trouble building in components into their project that are not used internally at Facebook, but they just wanted to meet the needs of the community. In this case, it was Gradle support. Another project was Presto. So Presto is a distributed SQL analytics engine. And when they actually open sourced, they were thinking about it from the get-go. So the way they did is they built plug-in architecture so that if they had to integrate with Facebook, it would be really easy, because a lot of projects within Facebook, before they're open source, they've just got like all of this crazy Facebook dependency in it, and Presto didn't do that. And it also made it easy when other companies are using the product to actually plug into the same architecture. And RocksDB, which is like another persistent key value storage engine, also actually did the same thing, where they have a pluggable architecture and makes it really easy for external contributors to actually plug in and do the same thing. So now that you've kind of like understood the audience, the next thing that we actually ask people to look at is, on that day, when it's showtime, on launch day, you want to create a really awesome initial experience. So a lot of people may want just like, okay, I got code, I'm just going to throw it over the wall, and they don't take time to actually make sure that things look really good. And believe me, take a lot of time on that. It's well worth it. So that when somebody tries out your project, you may only get 5 minutes, a very short amount of time that you need to make it really clear what is your project is doing, why should I care about it, and how can I get up and running quickly. So this may take the form of just simply, if it's an Android project, add Maven support. If you're doing an iOS, make sure it works with CocoaPods. And if it's JavaScript, have an NPM package. These are very obvious, but sometimes some of the teams don't do that. And also, this is where documentation is really critical. So that getting that quick start guide where somebody can go in and in 1, 2, 3, however many, the shortest amount of steps, they can get up and running, and it has to be really accurate. It has to just work. So the open source team actually spends a lot of time in that day zero experience, where we look at different projects before they've launched and make sure things work well. And we also give website services, so that if teams want to create web services that look really awesome and work, we provide that as well. So the other thing that you want to do immediately after launch is to just listen and educate. So after you release the projects, that's when the spotlight comes on. That's when people are posting on social media. The first issues are coming in. You want to make sure that you are listening and that you are actually responding to those requests. And for example, Rebound, which is an Android animation library that was released, when it was first released, it actually included a Guava dependency that just made this project really huge. And kind of got really dinged about it on social media by an influencer. So Will Bailey, who is the maintainer, actually took that to heart and made sure he kind of smoothed things out, added everything that was needed, and the project has been really successful after that. And it actually set the tone for a lot of the Android libraries and how we actually open source those as well. So whether or not you actually go and attend conferences so that you can listen to the audience, or you just go to meetups, or you even organize your own conferences, any way that you actually meet the audience is very valuable. It might not seem scalable and you don't have the time, but it is something that you want to think about. And React has actually done a phenomenal job. They had actually 2 very good conferences this year that were very well attended. You're able to meet with the community and see exactly how they're doing it. They get a chance to talk to project authors, see live demos. It's really invaluable. So this is how you want to actually go and spread your message and get to kind of know your community. So that's good.
So let's say you don't know your community, right? Or a new person comes to GitHub, to your project, makes an issue, or opens a pull request. You click on their username and you don't see anything. Like, this is their first interaction, or you don't see any other security projects or any other projects related to your software stack. What are you going to do? Start Googling their name, try to figure out, like, creep on them a little bit, figure out what they're about, figure out how to respond? That's not sustainable, right? I don't want to do that at all. What we found with OSQuery is create a tag on GitHub called triage. Someone new comes to the project, tag that issue or that pull request with triage immediately, right, as fast as possible. That's a really small ping to the person to say, like, I got it. I know you have a problem or you want to tell me something. I'm looking into it, right? It gives them a really good feeling. And that kind of extends the amount of time that you have to, like, research them or then ping them offline or go back and forth on the pull request or issue. So let's know our community. Let's know our community. Let's do some research before we open source this project, figure out who's going to be the users, who's going to get the most impact out of it. So we're building an intrusion detection and host monitoring tool that uses SQL, right? You're going to install this tool on your clients. You're going to install this tool on your agents, right? Our community actually was the system administrators and the defenders of networks. That was our biggest community. Those are the biggest users of our project. Right? That's not what we thought. So we're like, awesome, we got SQL. Everyone at Facebook loves SQL. We got operating system concepts as tables, right? Developers and administrators, everyone loves SQL. We're going to put this SQL thing out there. We had an implicit thought that because we built it in SQL and we loved SQL at Facebook, the entire world would know exactly what to do, would see the number of tables that we put out there on release day, and start adding to this list, adding to this bucket of tables. One thing we kept saying is, like, we're going to put all these basic tables out there, and everyone's going to fill this jar up with all the really complex, awesome tables, right? We're going to do the groundwork. People are just going to fill it in, right? That was an implicit thought, and it was wrong. The people using our software, our community, the defenders and the system administrators, were not going to contribute back tables, right? It's not going to happen. Someone really interested in C++ or seeing this project, wanting something to hack on, they might add a table, right? So we boil this down to a couple of concepts, right? A couple of takeaways. Something that we kind of had to learn the hard way after 6 months of having the security tool out there is it's okay to find that core community. Find the community, focus on them, right? And in this case, we were doing the wrong community. We were doing the developers. Switch focus, start focusing on the defenders, the administrators, the users of this tool. Then we found our core community, right? Then we found that kind of love. Another thing that we were able to tease out of people during like kind of one-on-one talking or in private chat channels was people were seeing this tool and the tools like it beforehand as kind of their secret weapon. And they didn't really want to talk about it too much. And that was an odd piece of feedback to hear. But later, we kind of learned that that's awesome. This tool, this brand new capability, people were installing it, seeing immediate value from it, and saying that it is something that's taking their defense program, their intrusion detection program, their host visibility program, and making it phenomenal. It was giving them all the data that they could see, right? And because of that, because it was kind of like the secret capability that they're deploying, they didn't really want to kind of talk about the data that it was giving out, right? And that kind of makes sense now. You know, you deploy something that's going to give you visibility about problems on your network or potential threats to your network, you're not going to talk about that, right? You're going to be actually adverse to talking about that. And that's okay. That is okay. So and then the final piece of advice was like a new user experience that enables collaboration in this case was the wrong initial experience. What we should have designed was a new user experience, someone coming to the project that allows them to take it, to fork it, to deploy it and see value inside their company. We want everyone to pull those forks back, right? We actually are kind of fork adverse. But in this case, with the security tool, deploying it privately was a good thing, right? And we should have built new users' experiences that enabled that. All right, and so that kind of gets into our next topic, which is after you understand your community, after you kind of understand who your users would be or who's going to get the most value from the product, you then have to learn or attempt to understand how you can support them going forward. This project is not done once you hit private to public, right?
So how do you actually support and grow your community? So growing and maintaining a healthy community is actually very key to your project's success, and it can be a grind. And there could be days when you're like, I don't want to do this, but if you stick with it, it's well worth it, and we've seen that happen in many of our projects. So here are some of the questions that you want to ask yourself. So where is my community, and how can I reach them? And then how can I actually interact with my community and continue to nurture them? So you want to optimize when you're trying to find your community for, optimize for participation and define all of your communication channels. Are you going to go with IRC? Are you going to use Stack Overflow? Is it going to be Gitter, Slack, Google Groups? Are you just going to stick with GitHub issues? So our open source projects use all of these channels and then some. And it just means that they actually go and find out where the communities are comfortable, where they like to hang out, and actually go join them in there. And sometimes it's a little difficult because if you go to all of these different channels, it's hard to support it, and you might be spreading yourself too thin. So some of the advice that we have for the different teams is just, just start with maybe just GitHub issues, and then as you go along and you find where the community is most active, then go do that as you grow more people. So you just want to see what works best for your community and actually adapt to that. Now that you actually know how to interact and where you can find your community, so where is it and how are you going to actually grow your community, interact, and mature them? So there's 5 pro tips that I want to go with. So first is to be responsive. We touched on this earlier, the very first day when you launch, you want to be responsive in initial issues, but this is something that you just want to make a habit. So whenever you react with people, just make sure that you're actually attacking their issues and answering them quickly. And the open source team actually provides dashboards for every single one of the projects so they can go in and see different metrics such as how long they took to respond to an issue, what's the pull request average age. And we've done a lot of these dashboards, so it's actually nice for some of the teams to try to kind of use game mechanics and see if they're doing better than someone else. But it actually encourages teams to be really responsive. Now, the second tip that I have is just to respect, empower, and mentor your contributors. So remember that another thing you want to always do is to be kind, because when somebody is actually coming and taking a look at your project, you don't want to lose them. I mean, community members can be really fragile, so be kind and ship love, as we like to say at Facebook. And be very cognizant of the different cultures, the different languages, because you may be supporting somebody and you don't want to make any assumptions about the communication. And you also want to mentor and grow your community members, because those are the people who will come back later and actually do really well for you. So React Native is another one of our projects, and it's a framework for building native apps on top of React. And what they've done really well is they had 2 really key contributors. And these people just started off with just having push access, and they mainly worked on documentation. As time went on, now these 2 key contributors are responsible for the entire release process, the changelog. They actually do the community newsletters, roundups, and they actually also post on social media. So just think about this. It's really been really awesome. And Presto, which I mentioned before, they actually had one contributor actually put in a really big pull request that resulted in a 50% performance improvement. That took time just to nurture and mentor community, and they have learned how to be really patient. The third pro tip is just to kind of be open. And being open actually means that you want to keep the community up to date on ongoing issues. You want to invite them into what's going on. You want to make sure that, let's say you're just too busy, let them know. People understand that things can happen. You want to be transparent. You want to share your roadmap if you can. Because if you do this, then people are going to feel vested in your product because they will feel part of the process. The other pro tip is you just want to make sure that you are maintaining the highest quality and the standard of your projects. And this can happen whether or not you have a new release or something major comes in. You want to make sure that the supporting cast, whereas it's the documentation, the unit tests, sample apps, that everything is very well maintained, because it can be really frustrating when you come in and you're trying a new project and things don't work. So make sure that you're always maintaining your quality. The last thing I want to do, so in terms of like maintaining quality, another thing that Presto does is they make sure that they use CI so that every time somebody actually contributes something, they make sure that they actually submit a test if it's a new feature. Or some of the projects that we do also, if somebody's actually doing a feature that requires documentation, they're not going to accept the pull request until the docs are updated. This is a good forcing function. It's a good discipline that you want to have. And lastly, you want to think about scaling your support in an intelligent fashion, because usually, especially if your project becomes popular, you just don't have enough time. We've talked about maybe actually promoting people to help with the contributing, but there might be other things that you can use to make things a lot easier. For example, Presto, again, they have certain style guides. So sometimes you might be kind of like battling on a pull request with somebody because they had a spelling error or they didn't follow your guidelines. So what Presto does is they use CI to allow them to look at and make sure that an incoming pull request is actually satisfying their style guides. So that goes back and forth. So they don't even have to actually look at a pull request that didn't actually pass that test. That's a really good way to kind of like lower the support overhead. Documentation is obviously key. You can actually lower your overhead if you just write good docs, and so don't underestimate the importance of documentation. React Native, which you also talked about before, so they do a really good job. They actually using GitHub webhooks along with all the different labels. They have a way of kind of managing the process flow so that an incoming pull request, it's very easy to know who needs to look at it. It's integrated with some of our internal tools and also our code sync tools, so it's very easy for them to actually manage a pull request and make it more efficient. It makes the contributors, the people who are maintaining the code, much more likely to go out and look at incoming issues, and it makes everything work that much faster. So these are some of the things and some of the tips that I would say you could take a look at if you want to make sure that you're actually maturing and growing your community.
Awesome. So we take those tips about supporting your community and we look at them through the lens of an open source security project. We said be open, right? But part of that means trying to facilitate these private conversations we mentioned before to be sensitive to everyone that's using your tool. So for us, that means putting time on our schedule so that we can jump on a VC with folks, right? Putting time on our schedule so we can open up a private Slack channel, have a conversation that's just one-on-one between us, the development team, and us, the team that's using the tool, OSQuery, and the team that wants to deploy it, right? And not trying to put a lot of pressure on those folks to then put their feature requests back into GitHub. We would love for them to do it, but we want them to do it in the right way. Prioritizing these features will allow us to evaluate them against what we want to do for Facebook, right? So this is a tool that we build in the open, but our primary customer is Facebook. We will drive all of the feature requests until someone else puts a feature request up. And I think that's the breaking point. Facilitate the private communication, the sensitive communication, until it's something that they want to put onto our release schedule. At that point, then it's time to bring it into the open so we can evaluate it against every other feature. The mentor new contributors is kind of hard. Right? Mentoring new contributors to a security project is like hard. You don't want people that are new to the code base putting things in that might be vulnerable, right? This is a security tool. We have an air of confidence that we have to exude. People are very critical of us. We don't want kind of people new to the programming language, new to the stack, submitting code. So we have to choose very carefully who we want to mentor. And that's as easy as inside the issue or inside the pull request, asking them how big of a deployment you're managing, right? Is this feature going to affect tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of machines or people? And also, how much time on your schedule do you have to give back to us, right? What's your position at the company? Is your company investing? Is your manager, is your director, is your CSO, CISO investing in this? If the answer is yes, that's awesome, right? We'll choose to definitely mentor that person. So looking through this lens of the 6 months and 1 year criticism, we now measure this engagement differently, right? For us, someone asks us to jump on a VC so that we can talk about how we use OS Query, that's phenomenal. That will make our week. We will love to do that, right? It's much better than a ton more followers. It's much better than those same people putting up pull requests, right? Because they've already made the decision to deploy. They've already invested in us, right? We're definitely happy to talk to them about how we use the tool. The other thing I want to talk about is like, this pull request gives me the same endorphin rush, right? Or when I can click merge, I have that same feeling of jumping on a VC. So we still want to optimize for pressing this all day, right? And that's just at the right point. So when we have these VCs, when we talk about the security tools, we say, hey, we want you to also invest back in us. The time that you're putting into this project, we would like to capture it in the repo. And if that's just you opening up an issue, saying how you use it later, once you've gotten all the sensitivities out of the way, or you can write up a little use case for our documentation, drop it right in line with the repo so that we can hit this pull request. It's a great feeling for them, right? So we tell them like, hey, this could be just advice for deployment infrastructure, documentation, or how you could harden your infrastructure. These are all valid things to throw up as a pull request so we can hit this merge button. And then we use our awesome open source team to give us these like CLA signed, approved in process. This is like our workflow. This is our software engineering workflow. We're going to abstract away from them. So they're not going to have to be burdened by it. This gets users like system administrators or people that are defending their networks much more comfortable in contributing and going through this process that's all automated for them. And then afterwards, if they really like that experience, if they got that same endorphin rush from us hitting merge pull request, then we tell them about these priorities. Like, give us that wish list. Like, rant to us. Tell us what you would love to see out of this tool. And let's put a bug, let's put a triage, let's put a wish list tag on it so we know how to evaluate it against everything else, right? And now you've captured this person. They submitted no code. They are definitely part of your community. You definitely want to support them. And now their name is on the project, right? Now they want to see it succeed. Now they're going to start jumping in, supporting other features, doing things like newsletters. That's amazing. That's how you build your community around security software, right? So we have about 2 minutes left. We're going to kind of close now and ask for some questions. Does anyone want to jump up here? I know we don't have a mic to pass around, but if you have a burning question, please come ask us. Otherwise, if you have a sensitive question, we'll jump on a VC with you too. Okay, cool. Thank you all so much.
So no, currently not open source or available, but that's something that we are we'd love to do that, yeah.
Yeah, so we have a ton of tooling around that.
Yeah.
It would be awesome to capture that and also release it. Yeah.
Oh, it's one of our, like, if we had time, we would do it next week
Yeah.
type of things, yeah.
Cool. So the question was, like, what's the process inside Facebook to get a product open sourced? Is it difficult? Right? So there are probably 2 starting points. One is you're already developing this thing. You're already seeing it work in production at Facebook, and you think it's now time to give it to the community. The other is like you're going to start a new capability, and you're going to start it with the forethought, the knowledge that it would be better if it would start at open source, right? So the 2 kind of tracks. What do you think the process would be?
Yeah, so usually what happens is teams are going to come in and we've got a tool which asks them a whole bunch of questions, including why do you want to open source, and then ask them about dependencies. There's a certain set of questions that we ask them, and then it kind of goes through like, okay, it's good, it sounds like a good idea, to then legal takes a look at it and says, thumbs up. And then after that, mostly the process after that is just getting the code ready for open source, which again means just removing a lot of Facebook dependency. And that's the coding part. When they're ready to go, we just help them with any marketing material, any social media campaigns. If they need it, and then you ship it out the door, and then we tell them the work has just begun.
Yeah, because then bots will subscribe to your repo, Facebook bots, that will tell you if an issue hasn't been responded to in 30 days and start sending you tons of pings and SMSs and messages on Facebook. So like you definitely need to start doing work. For us, for the security team, we kind of had to align it to our mission of defending Facebook. We kind of wanted to borrow the same thing that we saw from the developer community, and that they're putting like development libraries out there open source and attracting people who already have some familiarity with this and are seeing it as a reason to want to come and join Facebook. We want the same thing, right? We want to put security tools out there, get like awesome security people, awesome defenders to see those tools and have that same feeling, want to come work for us. And once we hire them, they're like, oh yeah, OS Query, I know how to use that, right? And they can jump in and start being productive. So we wanted to get that same thing. How do we approve open source contributions?
Oh, so it's like an external open source project already, and you want to contribute to that? Yes, it's just that they have to actually send an email internally to just get approval to work on certain projects.
That's a great question. So glog is a good one. I wanted to put up one pull request to glog. So email opensource@facebook.com. They look at the commit and they say yes. And then I email them again and go, I've got about 5 more. Like, do you want me to continue to send it? And they're like, oh, hold on, we'll take a step back. They'll do a more extensive search whether it's appropriate for me to continue to post commits to glog. And in that case, they said yes. My name goes on an internal wiki of projects to people working on it, and now I have the ability to continue to submit to glog. And it's the open source team's responsibility to continue to monitor my commits to make sure I don't start invalidating licenses or do any of that legal stuff, right? So it pushes the burden on our open source team and our legal team. Yep. Other questions?
Guesses?